Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're going to go past those ones and zeros you're used to from your databases, relational databases. And to dive into this whole world of fuzzy logic and how it can actually boost business intelligence. That whole adaptive business intelligence thing. Super interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's all about those shades of gray, the stuff that traditional business intelligence just doesn't quite get. Those systems, they're built on Boolean logic, right? So everything's true or false, black or white, no in between.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does fuzzy logic deal with those messy in-between situations? Got any real-world examples?
Sure. Think about trying to predict the sale price of a used car. You've got mileage, the age, the condition, but then there's all the subjective stuff, too. What one person considers high mileage could be totally different for another person depending on the make and model, right? And a scratch could be like whatever for one buyer, but a total deal breaker for someone else.
Yeah, okay, I get that. So fuzzy logic helps us deal with that subject to all that fuzziness in the data.
Exactly. Instead of forcing everything into a yes or no box fuzzy logic, lets things be kind of true. It's like a dimmer switch instead of just on or off.
Okay, now I'm starting to see the light, so to speak. But how does this work in practice? How do we go from all that fuzzy data to an actual business decision?
That's where the three main parts of a fuzzy system come in. We've got the fuzzifier, the inference system, and the defuzzifier. Let's go through each one.
Sounds good. Let's start with the fuzzifier. What's its deal?
The fuzzifier takes your crisp numerical data, like how many miles are on a car, and turns it into fuzzy sets. It's like translating computer language into something we humans can understand.
So instead of saying this car has 80,000 kilometers on it, it'll say something like this car has relatively high mileage.
Right on. It uses these things called membership functions to figure out how much that mileage fits into the fuzzy set of high mileage. A car with 50,000 kilometers might only be a little bit in that set, while one with 150,000 kilometers would be way in there.
So it's all about shades of gray, not black and white.
Exactly. And this nuanced way of showing the data is what lets fuzzy logic deal with all the uncertainty and vagueness in real-world problems.
This is pretty fascinating. So the fuzzifier translates the data into something more human-like. Then what?
Then comes the inference system. That's the brains of the whole operation. It takes the fuzzified data and applies rules and logic to it.
So this is where we set up those if-then statements that capture what the experts know.
You got it. For example, a rule could be, if the mileage is high and the condition is just okay, then the sale price is probably going to be low.
And because we're using fuzzy logic, these rules can handle those shades of gray we were talking about.
Exactly. Instead of saying, if mileage is over 100,000 kilometers, we can say if mileage is high and factor in those membership levels we talked about.
Okay, this is really starting to make sense. So
Yeah.
we've fuzzified the data, applied the rules, now what? How do we get a clear answer from this fuzzy system?
That's where the defuzzifier steps in. It takes the fuzzy output from the inference system and turns it back into something crisp and understandable.
So for the car example, the defuzzifier would give us a specific predicted sale price, even though the data and rules were all fuzzy.
Exactly. It takes all those shades of gray and boils them down to one actionable number.
That's amazing. So we started with precise data, but it was limited. Then we made it fuzzy to capture what the experts know. And then we ended up with a precise answer that we can actually use. I can see how this could be super helpful in making real-world business decisions.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll look at how all this comes together to create these powerful, adaptive business intelligence systems. It's going to be good.
Okay, so we've got the data speaking fuzzy logic, and the inference system is working its magic, applying those expert rules. But how do these systems actually adapt to all the changes happening in the business world?
That's where things get really interesting. These fuzzy logic systems aren't just static. They can actually learn and change as new data comes in, just like a human expert would get better at what they do over time.
Wait a minute, are you saying these systems can learn? I thought we were talking about using set rules.
We do start with those rules based on what experts know. But the cool thing about fuzzy logic is that it can adapt. Let's go back to that car example. Let's say our system is predicting prices, but then we see a difference between the predictions and what cars are actually selling for.
So maybe people are suddenly willing to pay more for electric cars even if they have a lot of miles on them.
Exactly. That's where this thing called the adaptability module comes in. It can look at those differences and adjust the system. It might tweak those membership functions, change the rules, or even add completely new rules based on the latest trends.
So it's like the system is constantly fine-tuning itself, getting better and better at understanding the market.
You got it. And this ability to adapt is what makes fuzzy logic so powerful for business intelligence. Traditional BI systems, they often have a hard time keeping up with all the changes in the market, customer behavior, economic conditions, you name it. But fuzzy logic, it just rules with it.
This is starting to sound like a game changer. But let's get practical. What are some real-world examples of how businesses are using fuzzy logic today?
Oh, there are tons, and they're always coming up with new ones. But here are a few. In manufacturing, they use fuzzy logic to optimize production processes, keep things running smoothly even when there are unexpected problems, like a machine breaking down or material costs going up and down.
So instead of having a strict production schedule that falls apart if something goes wrong, a fuzzy logic system can just adjust on the fly and keep things moving.
Right. Another area where fuzzy logic is great is risk assessment. Like when banks are deciding whether to give someone a loan, there are so many things to consider, and those traditional credit scoring systems can be pretty inflexible.
Yeah, they often miss those little details that might actually mean someone's a good borrower, even if their credit score isn't perfect.
Exactly. Fuzzy logic lets us build these more sophisticated risk models that take into account way more factors. And that leads to more accurate assessments and better decisions about who gets a loan.
This is incredible. We've talked about how fuzzy logic handles uncertainty, how it uses expert knowledge, and how it can learn and adapt. But what does this all mean for businesses in the real world? How does this actually help them?
The impact is huge. Think about a company trying to make its supply chain as efficient as possible. Traditional approaches might not be able to handle things like sudden disruptions or changes in demand. But a fuzzy system, it can deal with all that uncertainty and adapt to those changing conditions. So you end up with much more robust and resilient solutions.
So instead of getting thrown off by a small delay or a sudden spike in orders, the fuzzy system can just adjust and keep the supply chain running smoothly.
That's the idea. And this applies to so many other parts of a business. Fuzzy logic can help with inventory management, personalizing marketing campaigns, detecting fraud, and even making better investment decisions.
It's like having a whole team of experts who are always learning and adapting to the latest information, but without the huge cost.
That's a great way to put it. Fuzzy logic gives businesses the power to make smarter decisions, anticipate problems, and grab opportunities in a world that's becoming more and more complex and unpredictable.
This deep dive into fuzzy logic and adaptive business intelligence has been amazing. But before we wrap up, I'd love to hear about a specific example of fuzzy logic in action. You mentioned something about an energy production project in Poland. Can you tell us more about that? Yeah, tell me more about that.
So this project, they wanted to optimize energy output from over 100 power stations all across Poland, and at the same time, minimize the impact on the environment. Imagine trying to balance energy needs with, being eco-friendly across this huge network. It's pretty complex.
Well, that does sound like a massive project.
Yeah.
How did fuzzy logic help them solve that?
Okay, so the traditional way of measuring pollution is you take these really precise measurements at specific points, but pollution, it doesn't really work like that, right? It spreads out, it interacts with the environment in all these complicated ways.
So how do they use fuzzy logic to deal with that?
They used fuzzy sets to represent how concentrated the pollution was in each grid square. Instead of just saying an area is high pollution or low pollution, they could show different levels of severity. It made the model a lot more accurate and realistic.
Oh, that's clever. So they could measure the problem, but how did they actually tweak the energy production to keep the pollution down?
They used these evolutionary algorithms, which are kind of inspired by natural selection. They came up with a whole bunch of potential solutions, each one showing a different way to distribute the energy production across those 132 power stations.
Interesting. What happened next?
So these solutions, they kind of competed against each other based on how efficient they were and how much they impacted the environment. The best ones were then reproduced to create even better solutions. And this whole process was guided by that fuzzy logic model. So the solutions weren't just efficient, they were also good for the environment.
So it's like survival of the fittest, but for energy production strategies. It sounds like fuzzy logic was a key part of that.
Absolutely. The results were really impressive. They managed to reduce pollution levels significantly without affecting the energy output at all.
That's a fantastic example of how fuzzy logic can solve these real-world problems where you have to balance different things and deal with a lot of uncertainty. It's really inspiring to see this technology being used to make a positive impact.
And this is just one example. There are so many potential applications for fuzzy logic. You're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it feels like we've been given this whole new way of thinking.
Yeah.
A way to embrace the fact that there are shades of gray everywhere.
Exactly. And for everyone listening who's interested in fuzzy logic, think about how you could use it in your own work. What problems could you solve? What decisions could you improve by using the power of fuzziness?
That's a great thought to leave our listeners with. So if you're curious about fuzzy logic, keep learning, keep experimenting, and see what you can do with it.
And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Deep Dive for more amazing journeys into the world of knowledge.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time on The Deep Dive.